I do what no YouTuber has ever done before. I read my comments section. And in my most recent video centered around ENA Dream Barbecue, I had a lot of people comment that there is not just one ENA. No, in fact, ENA is simply a species. And I found this to be incredibly interesting. While it may or may not be true as it directly pertains to the world of Dream Barbecue, for this video, I'm going to assume it is. Okay, cool. And, as always, thank you for... But what we should be asking, I think, is not if or even how, but why. Why would Joel G decide to include multiple ENAs, like an entire species of them? And to that, well, I obviously don't have the answer. But I'm a human, I have thoughts, and in today's video, like my previous ENA essay, I'd simply hope to convey those thoughts to you in a semi-coherent way. This is not answering the questions of the game, but rather answering the questions within myself. So in today's video, I will try to offer my own personal interpretation as to what the many ENAs mean to me, and how our fractured self is something, well, that I can surely relate to. If you haven't seen that last video, I'll catch you up quickly. I believe the ENA we're seeing in the game is a war veteran suffering from borderline personality disorder. And I connected that to my own psychotic self having schizoaffective disorder bipolar type. We all caught up? Okay, cool. And obviously you should watch the previous video, after this one of course. So why would there be multiple ENAs? What is the narrative purpose? And again, all I can offer is my own personal interpretation, and since I'm kind of bored of conventional analysis, well, I want you to imagine this scenario. You're walking in the aisles of your local Target. You have much shopping to do, and you will not fall for their ploys to get you to buy more useless stuff. You mind your business, walking down the yogurt aisle, looking for any Oatly products you can possibly find. You want to be ethically aware after all. But suddenly, you glance to your right, slightly down, and you see an end cap, half empty, partially dusty. And something about it mesmerizes you. Suddenly, you want to become one with this end cap. Perhaps you want to escape this world of giants, you're unsure, but before you know it, you're the size of an ant. Like, literally. Your consciousness encompasses no more than a few small centimeters. You are finally at peace. You are finally an ant. But no, something isn't right. As you look up, you see the empty husk you used to inhabit, and you feel a sense of disgust. But even worse, you feel a sense of innate and horrifying disconnect. This isn't right. You aren't supposed to be here, and that scares you. You're not supposed to be an ant, and yet the undeniable truth is that you are. How long have you been one? Were you born like this? Would it always be this way? The more and more you question this, the more and more you want to rip your tiny little ant head apart. Then, you do. You're floating. You're unsure how long you've been like this. Perhaps you've never been in any control after all. And when you look down, you see it. Your avatar. But it doesn't move. It won't move. That is until you feel a GameCube controller button being pressed. Suddenly the avatar moves according to its input. Its will. One that you're not even sure is yours anymore. From this bird's eye view, you can see everything. Except your vision is always locked into your avatar. And you're not sure when this sensation will end. Will it end? And scene. What I'm describing here is quite literally a real-life experience I've had many times, and one that I think may be enlightening to the topic of ENA. To put it simply, is not just the feeling of not having a body, but the knowingness that you don't. You know because it's all you ever known. That your consciousness is not tied to your meat husk, that your very sense of experiential self can literally be 10 feet away from said husk, or made to be smaller, and so on. Sometimes your limbs even shrink and grow. I believe they call it Alice in Wonderland syndrome. But most typically, It is this bird's eye view, and the knowingness that an evil demon is controlling your every moment. This is how I grew up, and it's something I've talked about plenty in the channel before, but I want to reiterate it here. Self-disorder. And to best explain this as it pertains to schizophrenia spectrum disorder specifically, I won't do that thing that I usually do where I include an excerpt from another video, but rather will include a portion of a book of essays I wrote about the topic. A rough first draft, of course, so you can hear more of my up-to-date original thoughts that you haven't already heard a bunch of times. Self-disorder is a term you should probably familiarize yourself with. Eugene Bueller coined the term schizophrenia based on the Greek terms split and mind. A split mind. This is not to be confused with dissociative identity disorder. They are wholly separate conditions. Rather, it is to help articulate the concept of loose association that is so common with what I believe to be every psychotic disorder, but most commonly with schizophrenia. Loose association as a term primarily derives itself from disorganized speech, which, while being a primary symptom of schizophrenia as described in the DSM-5, seems to me to be more of an outward expression of a much, much deeper-rooted issue, like the tip of an iceberg. Schizophrenia is thought to be, well, a thought disorder. This checks as delusional thoughts are a staple, and it can be theorized, I myself have done it, the hallucinations are the outward expression of thoughts one is having. But alas, now I'm getting ahead of myself. Loose association is, at its core, a disruption of thought patterns. Typical associative learning involves establishing a relationship between two stimuli, or even more abstract concepts, something that those with schizophrenia were found to have trouble with. This is why disorganized speech occurs, as words can lose correlation with one another, and in its most extreme cases results in clanging, itself being when a person normally establishes connection through phonemic means as opposed to the conceptual meaning of the words. Rhyming is extremely common. I myself have never done this. Herein lies an issue. Words only exist so we may describe abstract concepts to better understand reality. And being able to connect those words together is what leads to more complex thought and understanding more complex concepts. Thoughts appear as words in your head because we've learned to understand external and even internal stimuli with language. As a young child, it is unlikely you would experience reality in this way, which leads to such a deep confusion that your memories of it are blurry at best. Of course, also accounting for the brain's physical development. You don't remember because you didn't have the words to remember. And in this way, there is nothing really to recall in the first place. Or maybe that's just me. Schizophrenics have terrible memories. With loose association, this connection is not properly made between words, and thus between thoughts. Complex concepts become perpetually elusive, and while it's not a 0 to 100 kind of thing, schizophrenics are still able to have complex thoughts. This process does not come naturally. It does not come easily. Abstraction is especially difficult as a schizophrenic understands things in what is referred to as a concrete way. An example would be the classic, write me a sentence, to which the average person would write, well, a constructive sentence. The schizophrenic, meanwhile, will write me a sentence. This is the most basic explanation of the concept, and in practice it is, as you may imagine, much more complicated. What I theorize this leads to is the disruption of understanding reality itself, as reality is, well, quite complex to say the least. Reality is inherently an abstract thing, and lacking the correct word sequences to put together your thoughts will disrupt that understanding to a rather drastic degree, while also making memories fuzzier, as you don't have the right complex internal words to tie yourself to said memories. But we'll be getting more into the memory problem in a later essay. Perhaps the most complicated thing to understand, however, is the self, as this is what we base our entire worldview on. We come to understand the world as it relates to us. Reality is but the whims of the mind. And since we understand reality through ourselves, and we understand ourselves through reality, it's quite the problem, isn't it? Now, I do understand external influences form the mind of a young child over time. Reality shapes the personality, but once you reach a certain point, that process kind of flips, with the above concept being true. The mind influences the perception of reality, it's just that the mind needs time to develop first. We clear on that? Good? Good. So if the self itself is elusive to understanding, where does that leave the schizophrenic? If we develop our core self, our most fundamental basis, based on our complex understandings of reality, if, say, one weren't to naturally understand such concepts, what then? Well, this, friends, is what self-disorder is. Obscenity disturbance. A disruption of the most basic sense of self. Because we schizophrenics don't understand reality, we don't understand ourselves, and thus we cannot come to understand reality. Quite a paradox, isn't it? This is clearly evident with schizophrenia, and honestly with at least every disorder in the schizophrenia spectrum. Delusions, themselves being a failure of perceiving object reality properly, are an obvious example. So I don't feel I have to explain it, but even hallucinations can fall under this wonderful little umbrella. Obscenity disturbance is an inherent failure to ground yourself to anything. It's like a tether ball without a pole. Wouldn't really make for a very fun game, would it? This would, of course, include the body itself, the very foundation of the self. I like to call this phenomenon expanded consciousness, where your being does not end at your skin, but instead your self encompasses varying spaces of the world. Sometimes I am an ant taking up a centimeter of space. Other times my perceptual field of awareness is 10 feet away from my meat sack. It differs at various points, constantly fluctuating. You are, again, never grounded. And when you don't feel as if your very brain encapsulates your thoughts, that they exist outside of its bounds, the brain gets confused. It begins to believe your thoughts truly do exist outside of it, and since we previously established that something common like hearing voices is just your internal dialogue, your thoughts then, well, you see where this is going. Your thoughts form-fit your consciousness, and since your consciousness is expanded, then your thoughts will be as well. Hearing voices does not sound like actual sound. There are no vibrations or waves, but instead are simply thoughts. And this dichotomy confuses the brain and makes it believe a duality. That your thoughts are outside your ears, but that they are still within your field of awareness. They are within yourself without being part of your physical husk. They are both external and internal at the same time, and this is all due to expanded consciousness. Okay, quote over. I feel like we're up to speed, do you not? This, friends, is self-disorder, the most base level of dissociation in a nutshell. But what does this have to do with Ina? Well, I think it can give a lot of context to her situation. Ina has a fractured self. That much is evident, as there is pretty much two of her in one body. And while this seems to me to at least be more of a depiction of borderline personality disorder, as opposed to actual dissociative identity disorder, it still remains clear that there is a fracture here, as in a separation between body and mind. And if we were to still go with the war vet hypothesis, this would make sense. When witnessing the gruesome nature of war, the mind reels back in horror. It exists elsewhere, but the body is still present. It receives stress and trauma, something the brain likes to run away from. And when you have your mind and your body in two separate places, well, you can see how that would create a dissociated, fractured sense of self. But with psychosis, which it seems Ina suffers from based on her paranoid delusions about the boss, something we again covered in the first video in her Psychosis with BPD, it becomes more complicated than just standard dissociation. Now, what I discussed in this essay I just, gave you an excerpt from, was with schizophrenia disorder specifically. But the entire point of my book of essays is that even something like BPD, which can feature outward expressions of psychosis, can still have these innate dissociative features. And as we learned with my Explaining Away Psychosis video, many mental illnesses and other neurodegenerative disorders do have psychotic features, such as Parkinson's, for example. Psychosis is everywhere. And while I believe schizophrenia has the worst of the self-disorders, what I hope you take away from this video is that obscenity disturbance lies on a spectrum. If you suffer from any form of psychosis, you suffer from some form of, whether that be lesser or greater, obscenity disturbance. Of course, I need to gather my thoughts more on this, and I wouldn't want to spoil my entire book, but what I want this video to do is to get you to think more about this. And when it comes to ENA and the question of why there may be more than one, I feel like my personal answer should be rather obvious by now. She has no sense of self. Her consciousness can be in multiple different places at once, or various lengths from her original meat husk. She can even encompass other bodies. After all, as the wizard says, you can be in two places at once. A common delusion that comes to psychosis is that people can read your thoughts. But I at least only believe this is the case because you feel as if your experiential field of awareness encompasses their brains as well. It goes beyond just a collective consciousness and settles in the territory of your mind is literally one with theirs. All in one. So it would then be natural to believe they could read your thoughts. After all, it's all one mind, right? To give my theory, if you can even really call it that, some credence, I offer you the once-in-a-lifetime music video by Talking Heads, which was such a huge inspiration for Joel G in creating ENA that many of the scenes in the web series, specifically the many poses she uses, directly parallel the music video. Now, I realize this inspiration could purely be aesthetic in nature, much like I did with ENA in my film Squid Boy, but for me, aesthetic is narrative, just in a more abstract way. And if you listen to the song, one of the many interpretations you may have is a psychotic one. A person living their day-to-day life when suddenly everyone and everything, his wife and house included, are suddenly not the same. They are different. And in as many times as you say, same as it ever was, it simply just isn't. Suddenly you didn't recognize the roof paneling of your house, nor the eye color of your wife. Were they replaced? I've certainly felt this way many, many times in my life. Put simply, it is a hellish experience. This is what is commonly called the Capgras delusion, where you feel like your loved ones and even objects have been replaced by some higher being or organization with identical copies. See what I mean? The signs. They're everywhere. In all seriousness, this is my personal headcanon, to which I will officially call the ENA psychosis theory. That the many ENAs, the species itself, is the direct result of her self-disorder, her dissociation that comes from her BPD. The many ENAs are a representation of her expanded consciousness, her believing herself to be a part of multiple different bodies. After all, she never had her own to begin with, right? Now, I realize that many will see this video as, well, a huge stretch. Joel G couldn't have possibly meant all that. And honestly, you're probably right. But art is not meant to be understood. It is meant to be interpreted. That's all there is to it. Also, this video has a sponsor. I've become a brand ambassador for Red Rock's latest campaign with Michigan Minds. Michigan Minds focuses on early intervention with psychosis, which is something that I believe is absolutely vital to finding an eventual cure to this illness. If you found this video to be interesting or even relatable, please see the links to their pages and website in the description below. Your voice matters, and more importantly, your mind matters. It would mean a lot. And, as always, thank you for watching.